As we are approaching NFL 2021 free agency, first wave of free agency, we are going to be talking about moves, potential players the Minnesota Vikings should be looking at for this 2021 free agency. Starting at number 1, we have Justin Simmons. Now, I know what you all are going to say. There is no way Justin Simmons is going to be in this free agent market. And I understand. But it's fun to talk about. Justin Simmons has evolved himself to be one of the top safeties in the NFL and had a tremendous season with 96 total tackles, one fumble return. That's not a forced fumble. One fumble return, 5 interceptions, and 9 pass deflections. And his market value is $14.4 million. So I understand. There is no way at all the Minnesota Vikings are going to be able to get Justin Simmons. And there's no way the Denver Broncos are going to let him hit the free agent market. They're going to franchise tag him and probably restructure his deal later in the offseason. I completely understand that. But we have to talk about it at number 1 because with Anthony Harris's departure, and we know this already, they've hinted at it already, there is no way Anthony Harris is going to be back in purple and gold next year. And we have to look at the safety group. We have to look at who can possibly be back. Andrew Sendejo is another possibility. He is a free agent once again, but he's also 35 years old. We're not going to be talking about Andrew Sendejo because we're talking about first wave of free agency. We are talking about the top guys that the Minnesota Vikings should be focusing on for this start. So his market value is way too high, $14.4 million, and he's probably not even going to get that, and he's probably not going to hit the free agent market. So once again, Vikings are not going to get Justin Simmons, but we have to talk about it because could you imagine the safety group with Harrison Smith and Justin Fields? Like, they would work so well together. That would be so good for Harrison Smith and Justin Fields to be back there helping out these young cornerbacks, and I mean young cornerbacks, all caps, because these cornerbacks, I don't even know if there's a cornerback under the age or over the age of 24 in this Vikings depth chart at all. They are all young. They're all on the rookie contracts right now. If we could have 2 safeties helping out these guys, that would help us out a lot. Not to mention we have Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, and other veterans on our secondary. So this would be huge for the Minnesota Vikings. And we have to talk about it. But once again, it's not going to happen. But if Justin Simmons somehow hits the free agent market, the Minnesota Vikings should sign him. And that would be a big signing. Ooh, would it be the best though? Because if the Vikings do sign Justin Jefferson with this Justin Simmons with this cap space, there's no way we'd be able to sign one of these next players. And I think these next players are just bigger needs for the Minnesota Vikings. At number 2, we have Cordarrelle Patterson. I and just about every other Vikings fan would love to see Cordarrelle Patterson back in Vikings uniform. Our first round draft pick, and I think it was 2012. I think 2013, he was our first round draft pick and has just been a career high in kick return touchdowns, broke the record for most kick return touchdowns. He is the best kick returner in the NFL. In just 2020, he had 1,085 kick return yards, which was first in the NFL, and his market value is $1.3 million. Okay, I'm going off of Google right here. He's going to get paid more than $1.3 million. There's a lot of teams that are looking for kick returners. He's going to get paid more than that. His only reason why he's valued so low is because when he's compared next to other wide receivers out there, he's not a great wide receiver, and that's where his market value is as a wide receiver. But once again, he is the best kick returner, and he's going to get paid more than that. And somebody's going to take him if the Bears do let him hit the free agent market, which once again, I don't know what's going to happen, but the Bears do have to decide what they're going to do with Mitchell Trubisky. He's going to be a free agent, and what they're going to do with Allen Robinson. They're both going to be free agents. And Cordarrelle Patterson was probably hit the free agent market, and I think the Minnesota Vikings should sign him if and when he does. Because the Minnesota Vikings, we need more depth, not only at our wide receiver, but we need a clear kick returner. Because as Amir Abdullah is likely leaving the team, the Vikings should not give Amir Abdullah another contract, as we've seen these last kick returners work out. Again, of course, KJ Osborne last year. We saw even Chad Beebe. Chad Beebe as a punt returner. He'll still be our starting punt returner. And then we had, who else do we have? We saw even CJ Ham try to be a kick returner. Vikings have just been so bad at the kick return game and special team return game as a whole, all around special teams. And this would be a huge signing for the Minnesota Vikings, coming back with the Vikings uniform and being our starting kick returner, because this would be such a relief, because the Vikings have fumbled way too many times on kick returns, and it's just it's hurt. It's been bad for the Minnesota Vikings. And Cordarrelle Patterson is only 29 years old and would look very well. He could be our wide receiver 4. Now, I understand there is a lot of Vikings fans out there that really do think the Vikings need a new wide receiver 3. And I just don't see it because Minnesota Vikings, we saw last season and the last 2 seasons how good Chad Beebe and BC Johnson really are. They are our wide receiver 3. Them combined are wide receiver 3. Chad Beebe, great inside the slot. BC Johnson, great as an outside wide receiver. And then, of course, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson are clear 1 and 2. When there's an injury, though, it's going to really show. The Minnesota Vikings have good wide receivers, but we need that depth piece. Because if Vikings have 2 injured wide receiver, maybe if it's Adam Thielen and BC Johnson get injured next year, Vikings are going to look really bad at the wide receiver position. And we know that for a fact, especially with the possible departure of Kyle Rudolph. This is not going to be good for the Minnesota Vikings pass game as a whole. And if that did happen, we would need someone like Cordarrelle Patterson, who's not a great wide receiver. In fact, he's not even a good wide receiver. He's just below average wide receiver. I think this would be a great signing for the Minnesota Vikings. We also have KJ Osborne, who needs to show himself still as a wide receiver because he has not showed himself as a special teams returner at all. And seeing more of him I expect that. I expect to see more of KJ Osborne. And then obviously Tajay Sharp didn't work out. Minnesota Vikings had other wide receiver draft picks that didn't work out, that did depart from the team. So, of course, the Minnesota Vikings do need wide receivers. But I think the whole thing about the Vikings needing another wide receiver 3 is it just doesn't make sense. Because BC Johnson and Chad Beebe showed how good they have been. And they are our clear wide receiver 3 and 4 right there. We just needed someone else in the depth chart. Of course, we haven't seen this Dan Chisena guy, or Chisena, or however you say this guy's last name, play at all. Number 3, we have Brandon Scherff. This is my favorite signing. If the Minnesota Vikings signed Brandon Scherff, this would be huge. This would be so big for the Minnesota Vikings. Of course, once again, I don't expect Brandon Scherff to hit the free agent market because, again, I think he's going to stay with Washington. He said he wanted to stay with Washington, which is kind of a pain. But once again, Brandon Scherff got an 84.1 PFF grade as a right guard. He only had 2 penalties and 3 sacks allowed on 857 snaps in 2020. This man is elite. This man is so good. 29-year-old player I think it was Ohio, 6'5", 315-pound man. Imagine this guy coming and being on our offensive line, an offensive line that allowed way too many sacks in 2020. I mean, Drew Samia doesn't even look like he should be in the NFL. Dakota Dozier doesn't look like he should be in the NFL. And Pat Elflein, I'm surprised he even is in the NFL to this day. So at the same time, Vikings have really struggled at the guard position as a whole, of course, last year, and especially last year, and then also in 2019 and all the years prior. Vikings offensive line is just the biggest need every offseason, it feels like, and I'm kind of tired of it, to be honest, because this is always the biggest need for the Vikings, especially when you have a quarterback like Kirk Cousins who loves to sit inside that pocket and just wait inside that pocket for the quarterback or for whatever pressure and then finally move outside the pocket and usually get a sack anyways. So if we do sign Brandon Scherff, this would be a huge signing for the Minnesota Vikings. Of course, he would be our starting right guard as he is a right guard with Washington, and we would probably lose Riley Reif. I would expect that the Vikings would trade Riley Reif, but once again, if they can hold on to Riley Reif for one more season, we could move Ezra Cleveland to left guard, and that would be such a good offensive line right there. And you wouldn't need to draft another guard. You wouldn't need to draft another offensive lineman as a whole, because we have seen in this past, Rick Spielman cannot draft offensive linemen. I don't care. I am never comfortable with Rick Spielman ever drafting offensive linemen, and not having to draft an offensive lineman in the first few rounds, maybe swinging on someone round 6, 7, whatever. If it doesn't work out, who cares? Maybe doing that instead would be a lot more, for Vikings fans at least, we would like that more, because a lot of Vikings fans are just saying you need to get a guard in the first round, or you need to get an offensive lineman in the first round. I don't want to see it happen, because we have seen enough offensive linemen draft in the first few rounds and they seem to never work out. I mean, Brian O'Neill seems to be like the only offensive lineman out of the last few however many years that actually looks like it was a good draft pick. The other ones looks like no, especially Matt Khalil, 4th overall pick. Number 4, we have the most anticipated player, because he is very likely to hit the free agent market, and that is Joe Thuney, left guard out of the New England Patriots. And the reason why he's expected to hit the free agent market is because he is valued at $13.9 million, and I don't expect the New England Patriots to pay that for him, especially with this Michael Onwenu or whatever. He was a 6th-round draft pick out of Michigan, something about Patriots and their 6th-round draft picks out of Michigan. He looked amazing, and he looks like he should be a starter. 6th-round draft pick, and they look better than everybody on our offensive line. That is just Patriots are just too lucky. Anyways, if the Vikings can get Joe Thuney, this would be huge for our team. Of course, he would be our starting left guard. He did score a 74.2 PFF grade, and his market value is $13.9 million, which is a lot for the Minnesota Vikings, but it is worth it. If you can get out of that Kyle Rudolph contract, if you can get out of the Riley Reiff contract, if you can somehow get some pay cuts on some of these guys' contract, paying Joe Thuney would be huge for the Minnesota Vikings. This would be so big. The thing is, though, who would be our starting right guard? Because I don't want to see Ezra Cleveland starting at right guard anymore for the Minnesota Vikings. I have seen enough of it, and I don't expect that to happen anymore. Although, once again, give him another shot. I mean, it's Ezra Cleveland. It was a second-round draft pick. You should give him another shot. So for that reason, I would expect him to still be our starting right guard, or the Vikings can possibly take another right guard in free agency. I just don't see it happening, and Joe Thuney being our starting left guard would be such a relief for the Minnesota Vikings. Imagine having him on our team. Although if the Vikings do trade away Riley Reiff, it'd be very possible that they do move Ezra Cleveland to left tackle, because that is his initial position in the first place. So it would be, that'd be kind of rough, because you would lose Riley Reiff, and of course you're going to lose Riley Reiff in one season anyways, and then moving Ezra Cleveland at left tackle, that would be, I don't know if it'd be the biggest relief, but still, having Joe Thuney on our offensive line, protecting Kirk Cousins, would be such a relief for the Vikings. I mean, this offensive guard position has been far too awful for way too long. At number 5, we have, of course, I just felt like I had to put him on this list, Everson Griffen. You had to put him on this list because, of course, he wants to come back with the Minnesota Vikings, scoring 8 sacks and 41 total tackles and 1 interception in 2019, his last season with the Minnesota Vikings. And this last couple seasons just showed how much he needs to play for Cordarrelle Patterson in this defensive scheme for it to work. Because this last season, he did not have a good season at all. And all of his seasons with the Minnesota Vikings did work well, not to mention the fact his market value after 2020 is only $2 million. Okay, the Minnesota Vikings need to give Everson Griffen another contract. He wants to come back, so just put him on like the smallest deal possible. $1.3 million 1-year deal. Just use him as a transitional piece. If the Vikings can bring back Everson Griffen and use him as a transitional piece, of course he is 33 years old, so I don't expect him to be on like a more than 1-year contract. I would expect this to be probably his last season with the Minnesota Vikings. If you can use him as a transitional piece, maybe transitioning into possibly DJ Wanham or a new draft pick, maybe a new rookie that the Minnesota Vikings do decide to draft in this next draft. This would be huge for the Vikings, and I would love to see Everson Griffen back in purple and gold being our starting defensive end, and we can bring back the defensive end duo between him and Daniel Hunter, the defensive end duo that we love and used to see, and we wish we could bring that back, especially after being the worst pass rushing team in the NFL last year. It's Everson Griffen, and taking him in the first wave of free agency would make sense, of course, because he wants to come with the team. He'll probably take a pay cut to come with the team. If he's I guess it wouldn't be a pay cut. He'll probably take a small contract, a small 1-year contract to play with the team, and possibly if he has a good season, you can put him on for another couple years if you don't have his replacement. Because Afadio Denebo, we saw he's not ready to be a starting defensive end. DJ Wanham, of course, he's only going into his second year, and he was a 4th round draft pick. I wouldn't expect him to be ready at all.